Today I'm going to be doing a book tag. So I'm going to be doing the library book tag, which was created by BookBuds, and there are two sets of questions. One set based on if you do use your library and one set based on if you don't. And I'm going to kind of jump between the two sets because it's not straightforward. The first question in the section of if you do go to your library is how often do you go to your library? And in the if you don't go to the library set of questions, it's why don't you go to the library? I don't really go to my local physical library, even though it is really close to my house. It's like 5 minutes walk away, if even. And the reason I don't do that is quite simply because I have enough physical books unread on my shelves that I could be a library. When I didn't have as many unread physical books on my shelves, I used to use my local library, which isn't the one that's local to me now, but over the years I've had various local libraries. I used to use them to kind of satisfy the craving of going on a book haul without actually spending any money or growing my shelves. That was partially because I had less disposable income and partially because I had less space in the places that I lived previously. Now, obviously I wasn't just using them to satisfy that itch of getting more books onto my shelves. I was also reading them. I think perhaps if I was a more sensible person, I would get books out of the library and read them and decide if I wanted to then purchase a copy of them if I really liked them, because I do like my own shelves being like a reflection of my reading tastes. I do like having books as possessions. And the second question in the don't category of questions is where do you get your books from? In the next few weeks I am planning to do a whole video on my book acquiring habits and why my TBR is so massive, but the short answer to this is I do buy a lot of books new, I buy a lot of books secondhand, but I also get sent books from publishers and I get a lot of books from my own work. And while we're talking about work, that's relevant to libraries because I do spend a lot of time in other libraries. So a significant portion of my professional life, of my job, is focused on libraries and specifically children's libraries. So libraries in schools or the children's section in public libraries. So another one of the questions later on in the tag is when was the last time you stepped foot in a library? And the answer is actually quite regularly, just not my own library. And another one of the questions is, do you know your librarian by name? And again, I don't know my local librarian by name, but I know lots of other librarians by name. Whilst I'm not using my physical library to source my physical reading material anymore, it is something that is hugely close to my heart. As I said, it's a huge part of my professional life and it is a huge factor, if not the main factor, in why I'm a reader. I would go to the library every single week when I was a kid and I would max out my library card and I would return all of those. I think I was allowed to get 6 books out on a kid's card. I would read them within the week and return them on the next Saturday and get all of my reading material again. And I also had to get my mum to get a library card, which you could get 10 books out on an adult's library card, and I would then end up getting 16 books out at a time. The library was massively important to me as a kid, and as I said, when I was a student and kind of early on in my adulthood, they were so important to me. There are a few questions about your experiences in a library as a kid, so I'm going to answer those. One of those was, did you ever go to story time at the library as a kid? I don't think so. I don't really have any memory of something like this. I don't know if it's just that we didn't go or I just don't have memories of it, but I definitely know that if I'm ever fortunate enough to have kids of my own, we will be going to story time. And the next question was, have you ever borrowed a movie or video game from the library? Again, not as an adult, but I definitely did when I was a kid. I would get DVDs out, I would get games out, I got loads of CDs out of my library and also physical audiobooks. So I definitely remember getting cassette tape audiobooks and then CD audiobooks. And that kind of transitions me into talking more about my relationship with libraries now, because whilst I don't get any physical books from libraries anymore, I love their digital rental system for audiobooks. That is what I use my library for. I always have multiple audiobooks from my library, and not just my current local library. One of the other questions in the tag was, do you belong to more than one library system? And yes, I am a slut when it comes to library systems. I still have all of my library cards and logins from every place that I've lived as an adult to maximize my pool of audiobooks to choose from. I don't see any point in having an Audible subscription or any of these other kind of subscription services when the library is free. Like, yes, you might not be able to get the audiobook that you want instantly, whether that's because they don't have it or because it's like already rented out until a certain time. But on Audible, you have to pay $7.99 to only get one book. And like on other audiobook services, there's also restrictions to like what you can get at any one time. And once again, the library is free. I don't mind having to wait a few weeks for an audiobook that I would really like to listen to when it's free. And I have never found myself in a situation where I haven't been able to find an audiobook that I'm interested in listening to like immediately. There is always something available that I want to listen to. Now, what I actually use this for is listening to books that I do already have physically on my shelves. So if you're ever wondering how I manage to read like 10 books in a month, which, you know, isn't as much as other people on the bookish internet, but it's definitely more than like your average person, right? One of the reasons I can do that is because I do listen to books that I have physically on my TBR via audio that I get for free from my library. One of the questions is what percentage of books you read come from the library, and I don't actually have that broken down as a stat. I do think it would be interesting for me to start recording that and see how much of an impact it really does make on the quantity of books that I'm reading. Honestly, if you are someone that listens to audiobooks, I do not understand why you would use one of the paid services when libraries exist. There are a few other questions about libraries that I'm gonna whistle through quite quickly. So one of them is, have you ever been fined for returning books late? And if so, how do you feel about that? I mean, not for a very long time. That's another bonus with like the digital aspect of it, is if you reach the point where you need to return the book, it just returns automatically for you, so you don't need to think about it. But I think as a kid, we definitely had some like late returns on library books, and I definitely did when I was at university. And I found the fines at university really annoying because I was already paying like however many £1,000 for my degree and access to those libraries and those books. But I know the fines were like deterrent, so you just didn't keep hold of everything, so like other students couldn't have it. Like, I get it, but I definitely had a lot of fines at university. Do you attend special events, groups, or book sales at the library? I have been to events in libraries over the years, but I guess maybe not as much as I would like to. And then there are a couple of questions about like free little libraries and whether you use them, and like book swaps and those kinds of things. I don't anymore. There are a few like book swaps and like free little libraries near where I live, but I don't really engage with them or use them anymore. I think they're like an amazing thing, and I would definitely encourage people to like check whether there is one locally to them. But the stage I'm at now with my collection of unread books, I don't need another avenue to acquire more stuff, but I definitely used them a lot when I was younger. I think especially when I first moved to London, there was a book swap in the tube station where I lived, and there were quite a few like publishing people that lived in the area, so they were normally like quite well stocked on good stuff, and I would always look on my way to and from work. I love libraries so much as a resource, and I sometimes find myself in conversations with friends where they're like, oh, I wish there was a place where you could just like rent this thing, and it'll be something like maybe like sports equipment. And I'm like, have you checked your local library? Because libraries aren't just about books, they are community spaces, and you can also borrow a bunch of like different stuff from libraries other than books. They are so important to communities. They are one of the few spaces left in society where you can just enjoy them for free. Like, you do not need to go there and buy a coffee to be able to use the space to work. They are so important to me personally, even though I don't use them in the way that other people do, and they are so incredibly important to me professionally. I think libraries are one of our most important like pillars of society. So it's been great to spend some time talking about them. And if you have any particularly great memories about your time in libraries, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments. And if you want to let me know you're here but you don't have anything in particular to say, I think the most appropriate emoji to leave is the stack of books. That's it for me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.